Hello to current and future leaders. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of The Big Idea, where we get to talk to exciting and dynamic Southeast Asian leaders. And we have a special guest with us today who will be discussing Pride Month and the status of LGBTIQ communities in Southeast Asia. So let's introduce Sam Dumanlag to the program. Welcome.
Hi everyone. Hi Jason, and hi to all the viewers and listeners of this US ASEAN mission.
Thanks so much. Thanks for being with us. Now, we've talked before last year, and it was wonderful to talk to you then, and it's great to see you again this year for Pride Month. So, you have an NGO which primarily focuses on the Philippines, Mindanao Pride. Please tell our audience a little bit about Mindanao Pride.
Thank you so much for that, Jason. Mindanao Pride is a regional organization situated in the islands of Mindanao, which is an organization composed of LGBTIQ communities. These are lesbians, gays, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and queer individuals here in Mindanao, working on um, working on for human rights, and of course working on for the support to justice, equality, and freedom. They contribute to the LGBTIQ communities. At the same time, we promote Soji SC, or the sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics. And of course, the tantamount, what we do, it's mainly on human rights.
And these issues are so simple and yet complex at the same time, right?
Yes.
Ultimately, it's about people expressing themselves, finding what most suits them for their life, what brings them joy, what brings them happiness, and of course, if what they're doing causes no harm to others, then we should all embrace individuality and differences. So,
Yes.
tell us a little bit about the LGBTIQ plus communities in Mindanao and the Philippines. What is the status of their rights right now?
Currently, the LGBTIQ community in the Philippines is currently on its part of giving them the rights. Currently, we're pushing through the anti-Soji bill, or the not anti-Soji, sorry, it's the anti-discrimination bill, or what we call as the Soji bill. We are promoting that one because we would like to have of safe spaces. Actually, we already passed through a bill called the Safe Spaces Law here in the Philippines, and thus the LGBTIQ community have already been long struggled. It's been almost decades of struggling to pass through the Soji bill, and hopefully we could be able to pass through the Soji bill in this coming new session of our Congress and a new kind of government that we are facing on July 1. And the current situation is far different from the totality of the Philippines because Mindanao is a melting pot of culture here in the Philippines, of which there are a lot of cultures that surrounds the island of Mindanao, which these islands composed of different tribes, different traditions, and even different cultures. That's why we would like to impart that Mindanao Pride is also imparting that despite of the differences, we become solid of our goal of promoting human rights and the rights of LGBTIQ communities. So currently the same also with the ASEAN, the ASEAN. We also have the shared sentiments of how the LGBTIQ community have struggled a lot compared to the Western countries that we have. But still, we are more hopeful than today that these struggles will really have its bright beginnings.
Well, I have a few follow-up questions for you. The first question is, you mentioned this Sogi bill. Could you unpack that a little bit for us? What are some of the ways this Sogi bill would help the LGBTIQ communities?
Actually, the Soji Bill or the Sogi Bill is the Soji Bill is not just for LGBTIQ communities, but these are for everyone. These are for everyone who has been discriminated or being violated by their rights or basis on their sex, orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. So
Mhm,
we would like to help them towards this towards the discrimination they've been through. That's why we are pushing this anti-discrimination bill. Yes, partly it may help the LGBTIQ community, but as much as we want to, let's make it inclusive for everyone else, not just on the LGBTIQ community,
mhm,
because
mhm.
that is how it should be and the bill should be for all of us.
So would one example be that this bill perhaps expands protections from employment discrimination?
Yes, it is part
Mhm,
of it. It's one of those examples and one of those scenarios that we could be able to um, infer or inflict the bill. Thus, also we could be able to use it on our schools or even on the choices of even on the choices of our preference in terms of partners or even on how we dresses and how we behave. We should be
mhm,
protected on this right and we should live on safe spaces.
mhm. Now, for those in our audience who are not familiar with Mindanao cultures, how do the different ethnic groups, different religious groups, how do they treat members of the LGBTIQ plus communities?
Like any other ethnic groups, they treat differently. Some considered as a taboo, some also considered as a um, some may consider it as against on this kind of sexuality, and some also prefer to accept this kind of sexuality because Mindanao and even the whole Philippines are still on the process of accepting, because as they always say, as our discussions with the different activists, as different LGBTIQ organizations all over the country. LGBTIQ communities in the Philippines are tolerated, but they were never been accepted. So
Mhm,
it's far different when you tolerate and thus when you accept this kind of community that you are living. So the situation, it would be a clash sometimes even in Mindanao. This would be a clash of ideas between the LGBTIQ communities and the ethnic groups or ethnic tribes ideas and commonalities. But nevertheless, we are here in Mindanao Pride and together with the different LGBTQ organization to become the bridge of these conflict and this clash of ideas and ideologies.
Well, certainly in many communities around the world, if people are not familiar with these issues or they don't have any friends that are members of these communities, then it can be it's just very unfamiliar. Some will be scared by it, some will be bothered by it. I mean, there's lots of different emotions. But if you have a friend who's a member of the community, you start to realize, well, we're all human. We just have some differences, but we also have a lot of similarities. Are people in Mindanao communities comfortable being out, expressing to their family members or their friends that, hey, I'm lesbian or I'm gay or I have an intersex condition or I prefer to express my gender differently or I'm gender nonconforming? How comfortable are people with telling others about their reality?
Yes, the stories of coming out. Actually, we are really into that we would like to emphasize that coming out is a process. However, here in our country, some of the families or even some communities don't really accept people who are coming out, or even those people who would like to embrace themselves, of who they are, because maybe, as we all know, Philippines is a highly religious country. There are more still conservatives who still adheres to the binary kind of sexuality, that there's always a male and a female, and there's nothing else. So coming out is a hard phase and hard process here in the
Mhm.
Philippines, and even also in ASEAN countries. It's still hard, because, as we could confer, and even in studies, we should go back to the culture of ASEAN, which is a highly family oriented, and this family tend to become conservatives, like Philippines also. This family tends to become conservatives of this kind of genders that arise from their children. That's why coming out was never been an easy way. However, Mindanao Pride also promotes that it is a process. You have to gone through this kind of process, because there's nothing else you can do but just to accept whatever it takes and whatever it must be in coming out.
Well, everyone wants to love, to be loved, so there's something universal in that. Compelling oneself to enter into a relationship with the opposite sex, if he or she is not inclined that way, it's not good for anyone. It's not good for either of the two people involved. Now, you mentioned other countries throughout the Association of Southeast Asian Nation member states. We have extreme differences. We have some nations where there's no law against same sex relations. And then we have other countries which have, at least on the books, very harsh penalties for engaging in a consensual relationship. So, does Mindanao Pride, do you do any interacting with counterparts in other member states within ASEAN?
Yes, we do counterparts. Um, our counterparts we usually do is that we do collaborative projects and programs within ASEAN and even outside ASEAN nation, through the help of different organizations, LGBT organizations, and embassies such
Mhm.
as the United States, who become our partners also for Mindanao Pride, who becomes our collaborative bridge of making efforts in connecting LGBTIQ communities across ASEAN and across the world. So basically, as we move to this kind of scenarios in ASEAN, we could definitely have a strong ASEAN, as we call it, because there are already bridges that was been connected.
Mhm. I'm glad to hear you mention that the US government is a partner. I certainly think of our relationship with the member states and the various LGBTIQ communities in that way.
Yes,
Now,
because
Sam, I know that you brought some photos with you today, and I'd love to take a look at those photos now. So if I could ask my assistant, there we go, in honor of Pride Month. All
mm,
right. For those of us who do not speak this language, please tell us what we're looking
yes.
at.
This language is panahon na aron hisgutan ang isyu sa LGBTIQ sulod sa relihiyon. Meaning to say, this is now the right time where we should talk about religion and LGBTIQ community inside the religion, because there was a pressing issue that arose in last year, that there were lesbians that was shoved by their religious members who were shoved because they were lesbians. They already come out as lesbians. So as a punishment, the religious members, their religious members already shoved them and thus it created clamor and hate, the hate towards this people who show this lesbian. So this picture we would like to entail that one of our missions in Mindanao Pride, and even to all LGBTIQ communities, is that we have to speak up. We have to speak up to those voiceless, to those invisible, yet needs to become visible. So we release a statement, we release this art card in a way that we would like to call our leaders, our Commission on Human Rights, our our stakeholders to take actions towards this tremendous and horrible situation of our lesbians here in Mindanao.
Thank you for mentioning that. Certainly, there's a belief that if you persecute people with same-sex attractions or you abuse them in some way, that somehow that is going to change how they feel inside and to whom they are attracted. And sexuality does not work that way. That you're not going to be able to beat out the attractions. They are going to be there. So the choice is to accept people's differences or resort to those heinous measures. And we can only hope that we all learn to accept each other's differences. All
True,
right,
that's true.
next slide.
Oh, this one. The hashtag Kultura sa Gugma, or the culture of love. This is one of our siguro one of our babies, the project babies of Mindanao Pride that brought to us glory and considered as one of the 10 accomplished youth organizations in the Philippines last year. So this is hashtag Kultura sa Gugma, of which we emphasize the power of storytelling. We conducted a photo shoot, we conducted a video shoot of the different LGBTIQ community in Mindanao, and then by posting their pictures, we post also their stories through the captions because we would like to tell readers that this is the story of an ordinary LGBTIQ communities. This is your story. This is not just story of Juan de la Cruz, or this is not just the story of Sam, but this is also your story. You could be able to relate because we all know social media have been um, our our partner towards pandemic in surviving pandemic. So we had initiated a shoot so that we could be able that the our audience could read and to see inspiration out of the stories that they could see on social media.
Stories do have the power to change people's minds. For example, I'd never really thought about the challenge of having an intersex condition. And then I happened to find a video with a speaker on the topic on YouTube. And I watched the program and it just opened my mind to the public health challenges that people face when they have a condition. Sometimes they are compelled to have a surgery that they shouldn't have, or sometimes they need to have a surgery and they simply don't have the funds or the appropriate access to healthcare. The complexities of each of the letters of this alphabet, again, there are similarities, but there are different needs. And we need to hear
Yeah.
people's voices and we need to hear stories to really understand what people are going through and how we can be more loving and be more helpful.
Yes,
Thank you.
there are a lot of complexities, really, indeed, despite of
Yes.
the alphabets we are facing.
Yes. Yes. All right. Next slide.
Oh, our first ever activity in Mindanao Pride, the Kadaiyahan, or as we translate it, it's diversity. It's a celebration. It's a celebration of diversity in Mindanao. As we have discussed earlier, we talked about that Mindanao is a very diverse um, islands in the Philippines. So we celebrated Mindanao Pride. We celebrated through Kadaiyahan, a week-long celebration with a lot of jam-packed activities. And I would like also to think, maybe this is the right time to thank also the United States, the Embassy of the United States, who really um, gave their efforts and really supported Mindanao Pride through the Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative, the YCLE. So hope this is our um, Pride March. This is the first ever Mindanao-wide Pride March who garnered more than 2,000 um, participants all over the Mindanao. As you can see, that is the 9-meter flag that we prepared so that everyone should be holding the flag with pride and honor.
Hmm. Hmm. It's a wonderful image. See people out and about and celebrating.
Yeah, and this one. Okay, this one is our flagship program towards the election that is happening in the Philippines. That happened in the Philippines last May 9. This is the preparation for the May 9 election. We called it Bayut Butar. The Bayut Butar simply means that to all LGBTIQ communities, let us now vote. So, this is a voters education caravan. We tour around Mindanao in the voters rich areas in Mindanao. We gathered the LGBTIQs in Mindanao and we conducted the voters education. By this, we want to know the LGBT vote and thus we would like to help them in choosing the right leaders for this country because these leaders will really affect on our cause and on our advocacy in terms of equality, in terms of passing the Soji Bill. This is how it's crucial the election is. So that's why we had the Bayut Butar.
That's fantastic. And it is important for everyone to be involved in whatever political options that one has throughout the ASEAN member states and the United States, of course. And things are changing in the United States quite significantly. There was a time when the president of the United States was opposed to same sex marriage, but the last three presidents have all supported same sex marriage. Obama at the end of his presidency, Trump throughout his presidency supported same sex marriage, and now we have President Biden who supports same sex marriage as well. So when people become active and they advocate and they foster communication with political leaders, change can happen. The situation for the LGBTIQ community can become better. But we all have to speak up. We have
Yes.
to share our voices.
Yes, indeed. We have to. And lastly, the Bulan Mercado. This is our way of helping the LGBTIQ communities who had been devastated by the pandemic. There were LGBTIQ communities from the industry of fashion, arts, makeup industry who have been really devastated because of the pandemic. They lost their jobs. So
Mm-hmm.
by this, they converted their jobs by selling fruits, by selling services, and by selling products online. So we decided in Mindanao Pride to make an avenue, for these LGBTIQ small and micro entrepreneurs, LGBTIQ communities to put up their online businesses on our website, and we could be able to advertise for free their products and services because that is
Oh,
the
how
only way
wonderful.
we could be able to help them because
Mm-hmm.
we all know that all of us has been devastated by the pandemic. Some of us lost their jobs, which needs face to
Mm-hmm.
face, like the LGBTIQ community. So that is Bulan Mercado because it was Bulan because Bulan is a mythology in the Philippines, which was considered to be part of the LGBTIQ community. And of course, Mercado, as we all as Spanish and even in the Philippines converted it as a market. So it's
Mm-hmm.
an LGBTIQ market for everyone else.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, in some communities, some homes, if an individual reveals that he or she is a member of the LGBTIQ communities, sometimes those individuals are kicked out of the home, kicked out of the community, and become homeless, dependent. So, having a service like this one you mentioned, Bulan Mercado, where the community could support people trying to make a living, trying to make sure they can afford a place to stay, it's a wonderful initiative to come together to help in a very, very practical way.
Yes, that's the only way we could do. Actually, before Bulan Mercado, we created a fundraising
Hmm.
concert, and fortunately we contacted the Miss Universe Peer Awards back to help us in the fundraising concert, and we garnered monies on it, and we gave this one to the LGBTIQ communities who are really in need during the pandemic, because Bulan Mercado had started only when we had the low rise of the cases of the COVID-19. So basically, this is also good. And I also acknowledge, also think we were we were one of the winners of the U.S. Embassy for the being one of the great initiatives of COVID-19 during the pandemic. The Bulan Mercado was awarded by the U.S. Embassy, and that's also one of the big parts.
Congratulations. It's fantastic. So we only have a couple minutes left, which is so unfortunate. I did want to talk about one thing. So sometimes when you're advocating for this group, there can be a lot of hostility back and forth. There can be nasty words. And how do you recommend that if you're an advocate and you're on social media or you're giving public speeches, sometimes you receive some real pushback. Sometimes it can be very nasty. It can be very insulting. How do you how do you find the strength to keep pushing through that and keep fighting for what you believe?
As they always say, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth will make the world blind by Mahatma Gandhi.
Hmm. Yes.
So we
Yes.
had so in Mindanao Pride, and calling all organizations who faces violence, who faces bashing, who faces the struggle of their cause and advocacy, don't lose hope. The only way you can do that is to educate, to talk to
Hmm.
these people, and do not use violence with violence, because violence and violence clashing with the violence will make
Hmm.
no necessary effort, but will result only to violence. Let us try to educate this individual who are naive, who are still ignorant of this kind of liberal thoughts. By education and by talking to them, we could make this community a better place for everyone. Talk to them with pride and honor, and educate with them with pride and honor, like what we are doing now during the Pride Month.
You put that so well and so beautifully, and it made me think, if you have someone here speaking very in a very nasty, very hateful way, and you're responding in a very positive and honorable way, as you mentioned, you might not change this person's mind, but there are a lot of other people who are going to be listening to your conversation. And they're going to be thinking, which one do I want to be more like? The one who is responding with love and kindness, or the one who is just yelling things and calling out names? So remember, by responding with kindness, sharing your opinions, being an advocate in a positive, loving way, you're inspiring many, 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 many people. So that's very good advice. I'm so glad you said that. So we have come to the end of this show. Unfortunately, the time just flew by and we had so many things to say, and we just scratched the surface. As we've mentioned several times over the past half hour, they're simple issues and they're complex issues. The simple part is sharing stories, being loving, being open minded to differences. The complexity is that for every member of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer, plus communities. There's a story there. There are different policy needs. There are different concerns. We need to have more conversations, not less. Listen to each other. Think about what policies and bills would just create a more dignified world for all of us. So thank you so much, Sam. Do you have any closing thoughts for our audience?
Thank you so much also, Jason, and thank you so much to you, US ASEAN Mission. Thank you also for inviting us, Mindanao Pride. To all of us viewers, let us continue our cause and our advocacy. Everyone should be able to see ourselves in the mirror with pride and honor. Happy Pride, everyone.
Beautifully put. Thanks so much, Sam. And, and thanks so much to our audience for joining us. Until the next time, take care.